أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ورضي الله تعالى عن السادة التابعين وعلماء العاملين وأئمة الأربعة المجتهدين ومقلدهم إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone, and welcome to the Black Imams Roundtable. This is our weekly gathering, our weekly think tank, our weekly powwow, our weekly engagement every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Sometimes we may move the time up or back an hour or so, depending on the time of year, but basically every Tuesday at 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, we come together to build. This is our cookout. Our Black folks know what a cookout is. Once again, every Tuesday, 7 o'clock. And when you come to this cookout, we expect certain things. Just like, when you come to the cookout, the real cookout, the food that you brought, the drinks that you brought, the condiments that you brought, or whatever you brought to facilitate the gathering, you drop it off as soon as you get there. At this particular cookout, called the Black Imams Roundtable, we had established years ago that everyone come with at least $10. If everyone would come with at least $10, we would have no less than $500 every time we come together. And those of you who have been with us for years, you already know how to do that. It's in the comments. We just getting started. So the way that you can contribute to the cookout is at the top of the comments. You shouldn't have to scroll far. If you're listening to me live right now, you shouldn't have to scroll far back up to see it. And alhamdulillah, the Black Imams Roundtable is composed of Imam Amin Muhammad of Atlantic City, New Jersey, Masjid Muhammad of Atlantic City, who will be joining us in a second. Imam Fahim Lee of Quba School and Islamic Center, Camden, New Jersey, East Philadelphia, aka the Imam of the Boom Bap. A lot of y'all may not know what Boom Bap is, but if you know what Boom Bap represents, then we in the same generation. We cool. And myself, Imam Naeem Abdullah, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Masjid al-Mu'min. And we are the Black Imams. Now, this gathering, as I describe it as a cookout, is not intended to be a class. This is when we get together and we exchange ideas in a more relaxed environment. It's what Imam Fahim's favorite rapper called edutainment, education and entertainment put together. We felt like we were doing a little bit too much entertainment and not enough education. So in the last 3 weeks or so, we've been trying to push the needle back a little bit more towards education. It's still not an official formal class, but we're going to put a lot more emphasis on education. And we've been talking about what does learning your fardul ain, your individual obligations, look like practically according to Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, or normative or orthodox Islam. What does that look like practically in layman's terms? Like how you do it. Like, okay, the theory is all good, but how do I do this thing? So the first week, 3 weeks ago, we gave a general overview of that. And last week and this week, we intend to get into what that looks like practically in the area of Aqeedah, the Islamic belief. Hence today's topic, practical Aqeedah, where the rubber meets the road, part 3. And so in my introduction is going to be based on a hadith. And so we said before that we hope and expect all of you to attend these sessions with pen and paper. Before it was just popcorn. Now you can still have the popcorn. I like mine with extra butter, but we need you to have pen and paper as well to take notes. So you don't have to throw away the popcorn. Keep the popcorn. Just don't get none of the butter on your paper that you're going to be writing notes on. So today, as I said, my introductory remarks will be based upon a hadith. So I hope you all are taking good notes, especially if you studied and took the 40 hadith of Imam an-Nawawi from us. We've done it in Pittsburgh. We've done it in Atlantic City, where we transmitted the 40 hadith of Imam an-Nawawi. So my comments, at least for part of the evening, you can put this in your notes as a commentary on hadith number 7 of Imam an-Nawawi's Arba'in, of his 40 hadith. So what I'm going to be mentioning, you can use it as commentary on the hadith, as well as for tonight's subject matter. And Abi Ruqayya Tamim ibn al-Aws ad-Dari radiyallahu anhu, and النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم الدين نصيحة. قلنا لمن؟ قال لله ولكتابه ولرسوله ولأئمة المسلمين وأمتهم. رواه Muslim. I just related a hadith on the authority of Abu Ruqayya Tamim ibn Aus ad-Dari. May Allah be pleased with him, who said that the Messenger of Allah, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, the deen, the religion, as is and nasiha. This word nasiha could mean sincere advice, or it could mean sincerity, really based upon the context in which it's being used. The companions responded when he said that by saying, liman, to who? This deen is sincerity to who? And then the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, to Allah, to his book, and to his messenger, and to the leaders of the Muslims, and to their commonality or their common folk. And this hadith has been recorded or reported, related by Muslim. So it's in Sahih Muslim. Specifically, it's in Kitabul Iman, the book of faith. The thing that's important for us here is that every hadith that Imam an-Nawawi mentioned in his 40 hadith make up the foundations and represent a rubric, uh, a foundationary principle in Islam. So even if you may not know the hadith word for word, it's a hadith that you cannot dispense with and have a proper Islam at the same time. So specifically with regards to this hadith, every commentary you look at 9 times out of 10, it's going to say that this saying, ad-dinu nasiha, is similar to the other prophetic saying, Hajj Arafat. Hajj is Arafat. Okay, how is it similar? It's similar in the same way that Arafah is a rukn or a pillar of Hajj. And if you don't perform the rite of standing on Arafah, your whole Hajj is invalidated. Likewise, if you don't have this thing called Nasiha, then the whole deen of Islam is invalidated. And so I'm not going to be commenting on the entire hadith, obviously. We're talking about practical Aqeedah, where the rubber meets the road. So I'm just going to make some comments, really reading, none of it is from me, some commentary on when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked to who, the first thing he said was lillah, to Allah. So what do the scholars, including Imam an-Nawawi himself, as we said, this hadith appears in his 40 hadith, but we also said it appears in Sahih Muslim, and Imam an-Nawawi is the author of the most famous commentary on Sahih Muslim. So this is coming from there and several other sources. They all, almost many of them, mention the same things about belief in Allah. And this is what belief in Allah is supposed to produce. So Imam an-Nawawi, quoting al-Imam Abu Sulaiman al-Khattabi, says that sincerity or nasiha to Allah is number one, to believe in him. So you should be writing down nasiha or sincerity to Allah. Number one, to believe in him. He mentioned a whole lot of things. I'm going to stop at 5 before I pass the microphone. Number 2, to negate any partner with him. Number 3, to not deny any of his attributes and names. And number 4, to describe him with attributes of majesty and perfection. And number 5, to sanctify him or to clarify, or in other words, to do tanzih, him from all kinds of imperfections. Imam al-Nawawi, quoting Imam al-Khattabi, mentions a whole lot of things. I'm going to stop at number 5 and inshallah finish up later on. But this is my introductory comments, is that when you're looking at practical Aqeedah, where the rubber meets the road, right? Obviously, we have to believe in him. Number 2, we have to negate any partner with him. I don't think any of us have problems with that. Number 3, not deny any of his names and attributes. Number 4, this is where we're getting to murky waters in our environment. Describe him with attributes of majesty and perfection. Number 5, sanctify him or clear him from all kinds of imperfections. This is what the basic Islamic belief is supposed to produce. And as we said, Imam an-Nawawi mentions a whole bunch of other things. I'm just stopping here at number 5. And I hope all of you who are serious and are taking notes wrote them down, inshallah. So with that, I'll pass it to Imam Fahim. And while he's talking, I'm going to contribute my part to the cookout, inshallah. And I'm going to share.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And alhamdulillah. Wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafil anbiya wa mursaleen. Sayyidina wa habibina al-Mustafa. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa salam. Wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsani ila yawmiddin wa ba'd. Alhamdulillah, we'd like to welcome you all to tonight's podcast or broadcast of the Black Imams Roundtable. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving us the gift of you and your presence. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase you all and increase us as well. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless you and increase you in every good. And we appreciate you being here, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to raise your ranks. Amin. So first order of business, please share this on your platforms, inshallah ta'ala. We've had difficulty in the past, people really getting the links to the live broadcast, and also be sure to, alhamdulillah, somebody said their notifications finally work. Mashallah, we miss you too, sis. Mashallah, we're glad to have you. And also, please be sure to help us to meet our quota, inshallah, a suggested donation, $10 per person. So we help reach our goal of $500. And as Imam Naeem, I think you mentioned last week, we have the luxury of when you contribute consistently, we meet our goals, we have the luxury of remaining independent. We have the luxury of not having to rely on anybody, not have to, pursue grants and all this kind of stuff. Like, this is a grassroots. It's a FUBU kind of thing, for us, by us, that you contribute, you support us, you help us out. And in return, we put on programs and we do projects like we have done and that we will continue to do, inshallah, all by the ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the fadl that he has upon us to continue to do this work. So please try to make that donation. Let's knock that out the park real quick, inshallah, so we don't have to be at the end of the podcast, on our Jodeci. Baby, I'm begging, baby. I'm begging, baby. Or that's what it seems like, at least when we're doing it, when we're soliciting people to support what we're doing for them, it seems like begging. But when everybody else doing it, as Imam Amin mentions all the time, it's fundraising, So if they call it begging, so be it, mashallah. All right. So my contribution tonight, inshallah, I just want to focus briefly on, we talked about this concept often about, this Trinitarian Tawhid. And with respect to what we're trying to discuss about where the rubber meets the road, um, we're talking about where things start to get, fuzzy when we talk about Ahlul Sunnah wa Jama'ah and following the Salaf and following the righteous scholars, because everybody who is Muslim, or for the most part, will claim that, they believe in Allah, they believe in the Prophet ﷺ, and some of those things are very basic. They follow the Sahaba and the two succeeding generations that follow them. And for the most part, people will admit this. But then when you start getting into deeper, concepts, there's some things where the rubber and the road meets, and this starts to cause this is where things are seemingly controversial or seemingly divisive. But when you go deeper into it, it's not really divisive. It's more of where the roads have parted, where the roads started out together and then they parted and then they start to meet again. And when that rubber meets the road, this is where it starts to become problematic. And this is where we are concentrating of making the clarifications where they need to be. And so for many of us, when we talk about these, we read in a lot of these books that we come across, you'll see in many of these glossy books that, talk about Trinitarian Tawhid, or they said that Tawhid has three categories, Tawhid al-Rububiyyah, Tawhid al-Uluhiyyah, and Tawhid al-Asma wa Sifat. And on the surface, so this categorization, categorizing this Tawhid in three categories, on the surface, it doesn't seem problematic, because when we talk about Tawhid al-Rububiyyah, it is the Tawhid, or the absolute oneness of Allah's lordship. And Tawhid al-Uluhiyyah is the absolute oneness of Allah with respect to his godhood, right? And then the Tawhid al-Asma wa Sifat is Allah's absolute oneness and his names and attributes. But and really the categorizing of this in three categories that's not really the problem, but it's the understanding of this, especially when we talk about traditional Sunni Islam and how Tawhid is taught. All right, and so I just want to touch on that just briefly. So in a nutshell, so when people talk about Tawhid al-Rububiyyah, is establishing Allah's lordship, right? And so what is nothing wrong with that, but what happens is that when people who promote this three categories of Tawhid, what they intend to do is to make pagans and idol worshippers equal to Muslims in that belief and with respect to Rububiyyah. So in other words, when people who have made this categorization, they have said that basically that the Christians and Jews and other people, they believe in Allah's oneness. Where they went wrong is that, or believe in Allah's lordship, that that there's only one Allah, but they took other idols as worship, and so this is problematic because this is not what they believe. So when you read the Quran, when the Quran mentions about when it addresses the pagan Arabs and asks them who created this, who created the heavens and the earth, who created the sun and moon, and they say Allah, right? But in addition to them affirming Allah's rububiyyah, they also believe in other deities. And when they believe in the other deities, they believe that these other deities had the power to harm or to benefit you, independent of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the essence of shirk. That's the essence of shirk. Because these people talk about Tawheed and shirk all the time. The essence of shirk is to make a partner with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and believing that that partner has some type of independent power to harm or to benefit you, right? And so that's the other difference, that even if though they believe in Allah and affirm his rububiyyah, the way to truly affirm it is by the kalima, is to say la ilaha illallah, right? And that's what they didn't do, and that's what differentiates the believers from the disbelievers. So in the category of rububiyyah, they say that there is no difference between us and the mushrikeen. They say this in their books. And I don't have the stuff referenced right now, but inshallah, maybe in the next course, we can have this discussion. But they're saying that we are equal in that respect, and believing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is rububiyyah, that he is absolutely one in his lordship, right? And his creating and all of those things attributed to rububiyyah. And so that's the first thing that we should pay attention to. And so the second thing is that when they talk about Tawhid al-Uluhiyyah, that Allah's Tawhid in worship or Godhood, right? So what they intend to do is they say on the surface that they are making Allah one in worship, but what they intend to do is they make Muslims equal to polytheists. They make the Muslims equal to the mushrikeen with worship. And see, this is where another part where the rubber meets the road, right? Okay, so we can take the questions. There's some questions, Imam Naim. Can you grab them? I'm not going to answer them now. So in Tawhid al-Uluhiyyah is this Allah's oneness in worship or Godhood, right? And so what they're saying here basically is that the Muslims who have engaged in things like Tawassul and Istighatha and Tabarruk, they are saying that we are equal to the polytheists or the mushriks in that regard. And so where this becomes problematic, because before the time of Ibn Abdul Wahhab, these were not seen as issues of Aqeedah. These were not seen as issues of belief that, in engaging in these acts of Tawassul and Istighatha and Tabarruk. And those things, they deserve a separate discussion. So it's beyond the scope of what we're talking about tonight. But when they categorize these three categories of Tawheed, they are saying that the Muslim who goes to who does tawassul by the Prophet ﷺ, which is the most common one, or does tawassul by an object or another righteous person, whether dead or alive, and there's ikhtilaf about those things. They are saying that this is shirk. They are saying that this is shirk, that you can only do it by the Prophet ﷺ. I think some of them say, and if you do it by, a deed or a righteous person or something like that, they are saying that this is shirk. And this is where this thing about calling, Muslims grave worshippers. So they're basically saying that because of the misunderstanding and making this a category of Aqeedah when it was previously an issue of fiqh, right? They are saying that if a person goes to the grave, right, and they go and make dua by the rank of the person in the grave, they're calling on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by that rank. They are saying that a Muslim who has already said La ilaha illallah, already affirmed rububiyyah and uluhiyyah, they are saying that this Muslim is making shirk. When the person who does that at the graveyard or does another means of tawassul, they don't believe that the person in the grave is the one that caused them harm or benefit. So you see the difference? That's not shirk. You're asking Allah by the rank of that person, by way of that person, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send you what you're asking for, not in the person in and of themselves. And so this is where the rubber meets the road. And this is very important, because to accuse the majority of the Muslim ummah of shirk is accusing them of disbelief, and the person, their disbelief is wiped away once they utter the La ilaha illallah, because they understand La ilaha illallah in and of itself is the ultimate expression of Tawheed. And the person who utters it, they understand that there is no deity besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is embedded in the La ilaha illallah. You do not believe in any other God or any other deity or any other thing that causes you harm or worship, that creates or anything except that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And that is already understood when you utter your shahada. So they're saying that these things that the scholars from the past have classified as issues of fiqh, they have made them issues of Aqeedah. And so in that classification of uluhiyyah, they try to make the Muslims equal to the mushrikeens. So the people who believe that these idols that these worship. So, when you see the word mushrikeen, it's translated as polytheists. I think a better word to use is idol worshippers. you know. And I mean, the translation get, you know, translation is a translation, but you know, people who engage in idolatry or idol worshippers, that's what mushrikeen are, that they worship idols, statues, and other things, and they believe that those things have an independent power, have a power to cause harm or good, independent of Allah who subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then, you know, in the history during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they used to believe they had 360 idols in the Kaaba, believing each and one of them had the power to whatever they assigned the power for. But they also believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was Allah, right? But those other things that they believe, that those things they were independent entities that cause harm or good, right? And this can be researched in history, you know. And so when you see the people who have made this 3 categories of Tawhid, they have said that no, that when Muslims do these things, they're equal to the disbelievers, you know, and assuming them to be mushriks, to be idol worshippers when they do these things of Tabarruk and Tawassul. And some of these things we have explained in previous classes, but inshallah we'll return to it. And so that is Tawhid al-Uluhiyyah. And so when they categorize the Tawhid in Tawhid al-Asma wa Sifat, right? And so in essence, they are, you know, on the surface, they are saying that, you know, that Allah is one in all of his names and attributes. And so this is another problematic category when they do it, because this is where they start to make Allah similar to his creation. They start to make Allah similar to his creation. And how do they do it? Even if they don't understand it, right? They are giving interpretations that are not befitting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses these attributes of yad and ayn and wajh and the like and istawa, so these are all related to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's his that, right? And so when we believe at Ahlul Sunnah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is absolutely one in his that, in his essence, in his being, his sifat, in his attributes and his descriptions, and his af'al and his actions, meaning that in those categories that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is unlike anything. He is unlike anything, right? And he's totally dissimilar from the creation. And one of his necessary attributes that we know is that he is al-mukhalafa lil-hawadith, that he is absolutely dissimilar to anything that comes into existence, from anything in creation, right? And so in this part of Asma wa Sifat, this is where the rubber meets the road again, where these people have said, okay, we accept Allah's names and attributes as they come, right? And they say that they believe that, but they don't really believe that, because you hear them saying in an interpretation that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used the word yad, which apparently on the surface means hand, they saying that we believe that Allah has hands, right? Or we believe that Allah has eyes. Now, even if we were to give them the benefit of the doubt that they don't understand what they're doing, in the English language, right, when you use the word has means possession. Has means possession. So if they are interpreting, you know, that we affirm for Allah hands, or that Allah has hands, or Allah has eyes, as some of them have literally said, right, they are saying that these attributes mean possession, when the tradition of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah is to affirm those words, right? And what they mean, we leave them, you know. We accept the wording as it comes, and what they mean for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we just leave it. And so that is much different than saying that, okay, we affirm hands for Allah, but how they are, we don't know. And so this is the big problem where the rubber meets the road, and you'll hear them in their interpretations. They'll say that, you know, that Allah has hands and eyes, why yada billah, and this stuff is attributing something to Allah's that, and so making him part of creation or similar to creation. This is where they fall and they lack. And some of these things, once you go deeper into it, this is why people have accused them of having beliefs of kufr, right? Having beliefs of kufr, because they're attributing things to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that are not befitting his majesty. And so you will see on many of their books, they say that we, some of their scholars said that we affirm for Allah 2 real eyes. right? We affirm for Allah that he has a face. We just don't know what kind of face it is. We affirm for Allah that he has a yad, or he has a hand, but we just don't know how it is. So they're affirming something that is a created thing, a hand, but they're saying that the how of it, we don't know, we don't have it. And that's different from what Ahl Sunnah says, that we affirm yad. We affirm that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a sifat of yad, and we stop there. That we don't give it any meaning or any interpretation, except that when to clear it from any kind of interpretation that alludes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala having body parts. And so this is where the concept of Ta'wil comes in, things like that. And so it is very important to know when you see this categorization of Tawhid. I think, did I get it right, Imam Naeem? So when you see this on the surface, it looks like, the average person will read these things and they will say, well, what's wrong? Yeah, Allah is one in his lordship and in the worship and his names and attributes. But deeper than that, you have to go into, go behind the scenes and see what these people are promoting. So the first thing is that they are saying in Rububiyyah that Jews and Christians are equal to you, even though the Jews and Christians do not say La ilaha illallah. That is the ultimate affirmation of Rububiyyah, is to say the kalima. If you don't say the kalima, then you don't believe in truth that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is absolutely one in his lordship. Right? Then the second part of uluhiyyah, they have made issues of fiqh into issues of aqeedah, and they call these things worship. Imam Amin mentioned last week about when we have discussions with these people, you have to define terms. You have to define terms, because what they call worship was not called worship by the scholars of the past. These are the things that were acts of virtue, as a means to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but not worship as worship is defined, right? And so this is where the problem comes, because if you at the graveyard, and we just seen it recently, we have people in our company that you go to the graveyard and you're just making dua for the person in the grave, or you just reciting the Quran. They think that this is worship. They think that this is the same as you making wudu and you call in the Iqama and then you offer in the salat, right? They think that these things are the same, and this is very important to understand. And so this is why you'll see none of these people, they don't go to the graveyards and make dua for the righteous people, or make dua even for the just regular people, because they believe that going to the graveyards and making dua in there, and the method of dua, one of them is tawassul, right? They believe that this is making partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the part of asma wa sifat, we should understand, and these are things that we've discussed numerous times on numerous occasions, that they believe that these attributes have a real and literal meaning. They have a real and literal meaning and an actual meaning, and they assign a literal meaning to it. So when they say that we affirm for Allah a hand, they mean actual limb, but not knowing how it is, or that Allah has an eye. And then where it gets deeper, that when you hear some of them say that we only say what Allah says in the Quran, right? And so that's another thing. They don't say wajh and ayn and yad. They say hand, face, and eyes. And so then when it gets down to it, so if Allah says, how they say that how do they say it? That Allah only mentions yad. So we believe that he has two right hands, or because left is not something befitting the law, whatever the nonsense they say, right? But in the translation, they get lost at the meaning, because now they are assuming a literal meaning, and in assuming that literal meaning, they are giving something to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is not befitting them. So know the difference, that when Ahl Sunnah, they affirm these words for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what they mean, they leave it. There is no how. And these people, they affirm a meaning for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then they're saying that it's like this, but how it is, we don't know. And so that's the difference, inshallah. And so Of course, we'll be touching on this in the future, but this is just like a nutshell, inshallah ta'ala. And it's very important to know the kind of wording and the wordplay that they use as trickery. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep us safe from bad beliefs and bad practices. Amin. So I'll stop there and I'll turn it over to Imam Amin.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa afdalu salati wa atamu taslim ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Lillahi tabaraka wa ta'ala. May Allah reward our brothers Imam Fahim and Imam Naeem for all of the efforts, to teach us beneficial knowledge. I want to remind you of the saying of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to Sayyidina Ali radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said to Ali that if Allah guides by way of you one person, it is better for you than the red camel. And in another narration, it is better for you than the dunya and everything in it. And I think when we have these discussions, we should keep that in mind, that somebody may be guided by our words. Saturday night, I was in New York City, and I was coming down the street, walking down the street, and a man, he was working, like giving out the tickets, to get on the bus or go to a show. You know how they have those people in downtown New York giving out those things. So this brother, he comes running after me. He says, wait. I said, mashallah. He said, assalamu alaikum. I said, wa alaikum salam. He said, you the Imam on the TV, on the internet, on the web. I learned so much from you. And he started talking about this issue of clarifying creed. Right? How by listening to us, he benefited and is learning the correct creed of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. And he just wanted to thank me. And I'm thinking to myself, as we talk about these issues, they're so important that somebody is learning, right? And we should keep that in our mind when we have these discussions. Somebody is learning about the proper belief in al-Islam, particularly the proper belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his attributes. So last week, we talked about the issues of the attributes of Allah and the importance of understanding them correctly according to the methodology of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. And when we say Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, we mean by that the people who follow the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they are the majority of the Muslim nation. And Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah became known after the 4th century Hijrah as in areas of Aqeedah, in the creed, in the belief, in tenets of faith, as al-Asha'ira wal-Maturidiyya, and included in them are everyone who believe in the foundations of tenets of faith as they do, which would include, as some of the great scholars said, the noble scholars among al-Hanabila, among those who are followers of the great Imam of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, al-Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. So in this regard, we're clarifying the creed of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, especially to a people who honestly have not been given access to this knowledge. In fact, they've been given more access to that which contradicts the creed of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. So I wanted to talk about this concept of actually acquiring that foundational knowledge of tenets of faith and how we would do that. So, as we mentioned, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Innama al-ilmu bit-ta'allum," that knowledge is certainly by learning, meaning someone would sit with a learned person and they would acquire from that learned person a portion of the knowledge of the religion. And that issue of how you acquire is with a teacher. I want to, as I'm talking about this, I want to clarify some things. We have to admit and get used to admitting, saying the word "I don't know" in its proper place. That's so important for us, right? I don't know in its proper place. And saying "I don't know" in its proper place. And what is its proper place? When you actually don't know a thing. That is an essential part of acquiring the truth. Being able to admit the lack of knowledge of a subject is a key when you follow through it with questioning and learning to opening the door to truth to you. I know among us, we've made the word "I don't know," "I don't understand" as something distasteful. So even if that's truly the situation, we won't say it. But we should reverse that. We should have it that we're open to acquiring knowledge about things we don't know, especially when it's the core matters of our religion. And a lot of these things that we're talking about that may seem strange to some people, or to many of us, in fact, is normal, traditional Sunni Islam. And it's important that we recognize when we don't understand that, that should let us know that we have a lot to learn. We have a lot to learn. So how are we going to do that? Since all of us may not have access to the knowledge of the religion in a proper way of learning with a teacher through relied upon books, I want to give us 3 basic texts that you can learn the foundations of the Islamic creed that have been accepted by the vast majority of Muslims around the world, right? So I'm going to give you 3 texts, 3 basic books in creed that these texts, from the time they were authored until our day, have been main texts, main books that Muslims all around the world have learned, have memorized, have commented on, have made marginal notes on, have taught the students, right? And conveyed from their time to generation to generation to generation, and it's still like that. These are books that the nation of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam have accepted with complete acceptance. The first book that I would suggest that will give you without commentary. I'm saying let's not worry about commentary at this time. Let's just know what Muslims believe. The first text would be al-Aqeedah al-Tahawi. I'm writing, I'm sorry, I'm not the fastest typer. This book, Al-Aqeedah al-Tahawi, it is a small text that was written by the great Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, who died in the year 321 after Hijrah. Imam al-Tahawi, his creedal text is extremely important because of several reasons. Number one, it was an early text that was written in the time of as-Salaf, at the end of the time of as-Salaf, which are the early Muslims, meaning those who lived in the first 3 generations after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that book represents the early beliefs of Muslims that has been documented and conveyed and preserved for over 1,100 years. I want you to think about that. For 1,100 years, the Muslims have been memorizing, teaching, commenting, explaining, clarifying this text. Right? So when one reads the text, one is actually reading a text in the creed that Muslims have agreed on it in general. And when I say in general, because there is always exceptions and qualifications that relate to the general rule. And that's something separate. But in general, this is something that everyone who says, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, and believes that they follow the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, accept this text. So all of us should be grounded in these fundamental points and beliefs that are mentioned in that book. It is only 100 or a little more points of tenets of faith. What Muslims believe. And Imam al-Tahawi, rahimahullah ta'ala, he started that text by saying, هذا ذكر بيان عقيدة أهل السنة والجماعة. This is a mentioning of an elucidation of the creed of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, meaning the people who follow the way of the Prophet ﷺ and the majority of the Muslim nation. So he starts it by telling you, and he mentions explicitly the term Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Right? هذا ذكر بيان عقيدة أهل السنة والجماعة. So he mentions Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, which lets us know that during the time of the early Muslims, this was their creed. This is what they believed. And Imam al-Tahawi, rahimahullah ta'ala, is very important in that, in terms of the fact that he was among the foremost Islamic jurists and scholars of Hadith in his time. And he lived in a place that was among the centers of Islamic knowledge, particularly Egypt, right? So he was in that center of Islamic learning, and he learned from great Imams like his maternal uncle Al-Muzani, who was the student of Imam al-Shafi'i, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. So all Muslims who say I'm Ahl-Sunnati wal Jama'ah, in general, they have this same conviction. To show you that this book is taught by the Ash'aris, the Maturidis. It is also even taught by Al-Wahhabiyya or Salafiyya or Athariyya, whatever name you choose to use. All of these groups refer to that text. So for us, we would be safe to say it is a text that has acceptance. Now, what you're going to come across is problematic. As problematic may be the interpretations, how people interpret certain aspects of the text. But the text itself, as it is a text that all people who say that we are Ahl-Sunnati wal Jama'ah, we are Sunni Muslims, accept. So this is the first text that I would suggest for all of us to become familiar with, to learn it, to memorize it, to have it as a part of our core understanding of tenets of faith or belief in Islam. So that's one text. The next text, yes, and as a shameless plug, Imam and Naeem has the translation, and we've went around to teach the book, alhamdulillah, and inshallah we'll be coming to an area near you soon. But it's extremely important that we know what we're supposed to believe. The second book that I would recommend, and it's earlier, it's later than Tahawi, it's called al-Aqeedah and Nasafiyya. So let me type that. Al-Aqeedah and Nasafiyya was written by the great Imam Najmuddin Abi Hafs Umar ibn Muhammad al-Nasafi al-Hanafi. He died in the year 537 after Hijrah. So he was a little more than 200 years after Imam al-Tahawi. Imam al-Nasafi, and there are many Nasafis, so that's why I told you this one, Najmuddin Abi Hafs Umar ibn Muhammad al-Nasafi al-Hanafi. His book, The Creed of al-Nasafi, was a creed that became famous after the 6th century. And it was spread among the Muslims, especially among the Hanafis and the Shafi'is. This was a creed that was extremely famous, well known, explained, commentated on, and taught in the various centers of Sunni Islam. Wherever you sound Sunni Muslims, you will find this text being taught. Even in our time, wherever you see Sunni Muslims, you're going to find them learning this book, its explanation, its different commentaries, and it represents a different way from Imam Tahawi's straightforward basic text and explaining some additional details that the scholars of Islam said were needed to further enhance one's understanding of the basic foundations. So you have the basic foundations of the belief mentioned in the creed of Imam Tahawi, and then you have some detailed points that are mentioned in the creed of An-Nasafi. The third book is called Jawharat al-Tawhid. Jawharat al-Tawhid was written by the great Imam Ibrahim al-Laqani, who died in the year 1041. 1041 after Hijrah. It is a poem, it is written in poetry form, of 144 lines. And in that poem, he summarized the creed of Ahl-Sunnati wal Jama'ah. He was a Maliki scholar and following the methodology of the Ash'ari school of thought, where Imam al-Nasafi, his text represents, for the most part of it, the Maturidi methodology. Those three books, all of us should be familiar with their contents. As Sunni Muslims, we should know what we believe. In those three books, you have the foundations of the creed of Islam laid out in such a way that it facilitates one's understanding and particularly one's memorization. And it is something, all of those books have been explained by the foremost scholars in Islam and taught in their religious circles, in the religious institutions, in the universities, in the Masjid, all around the Islamic world in every single country. So at least if we learned and became familiar with these texts, we are heading in the right direction, which is the direction of al-Jama'ah, the majority of the Muslim nation. And the reason why we're saying that, because now something we never had in our communities is standard Sunni curriculums, right? That everyone who comes in our community learns this, right? And that is something that should be passed on generation after generation after generation. So there are other books, but I'm saying for three main books to give you, and they're all small, none of them big. They can be read actually in one sitting, one session, right? A good reader can read it in one sitting, right? And I'm talking about without explanation, just knowing what we're supposed to believe, right? And here's why I'm saying that. Because scholars authored those texts specifically for common people to understand their religious beliefs. Because we have this concept in our time that I'm upon the Quran and the Sunnah. Really, to be realistic, to be honest, it's impossible for the vast majority of us to follow the Quran and Sunnah because we don't know the Quran and Sunnah. What would be more probable and more befitting of us to say, I want to follow the Quran and Sunnah, and I follow some of it based on my understanding and my access. That's more likely and more correct. I would like to follow the Quran and Sunnah, and I follow as much that I understand of it and what I have access to. And for the vast majority of us, what we have access to is far less than what is needed to extract beliefs and legal rulings from the Quran and the Sunnah. And then later on in this series of discussions, we need to have this talk, right? Because we have to have real talk with one another and know what we're doing. We cannot become like Christians. You're not a Christian who says, I follow the Bible, but never really read the Bible. Like, you have a lot of Christians like that. Like, I follow the Bible, but you never read the Bible. In fact, you don't even know what most of the stuff that the Bible contains. We as Muslims cannot be like that about the Quran and the Sunnah, right? We have to actually have it set up that we are actually taught the Quran and the Sunnah. I'll give us an honest thing to evaluate. You don't have to answer. But think of you, how many of you have read the entire Sahih of Imam al-Bukhari, the entire Sahih of Imam Muslim in Arabic language? I ain't talking about explanation. I'm talking about just read the book. So we're talking about the two Sahihs, right? Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, right? Just two books of the Sunnah. And if we be honest, that's why I started being honest, most of us have not done that. And if you never did that, how are you following the Quran and Sunnah when these are the two most authentic books of the Sunnah and you've never read them? I'm not talking about you read some of it. I said you went from cover to cover. I'm talking about you read it, period. I'm not talking about with a teacher, with explanation. I'm talking about you actually read it. Do you understand what I mean? Because the book of al-Bukhari and the book of Imam Muslim are in Arabic. So to actually read the Sunnah, you actually have to read the Arabic text. And I'm not even talking about you understand it. Did you read it? Because we read the Quran. I would hope most of us have read the entire Quran at least once in our life. Right? At least once. Right? At least once. I hope we did it every Ramadan at least, right? We read the whole Quran. I'm talking about without understanding. At least you read it. Now, if we didn't read it, Now let's talk about actually being familiar with it. So if you didn't read it, we can count you out. If you read it, how familiar were you with what you read? Be honest to ourselves. You don't got to say it to me. How familiar of what you read? Right? And then keep in mind, did you really understand? That's a whole nother level. So here's what I'm saying. That means so now, if we didn't read, we didn't fully comprehend and understand how we extracting the issues of creed that we need to know and other aspects of rules and regulations, and we haven't even read the book. Would any of us accept that in anything else? No, we wouldn't, right? So the claim of Quran and Sunnah, for most of us, is just that, a claim. It's not honest, right? So what we have recourse to is to those who actually did that, and there's a level of trust there, right? There's a level of trust. And we reach to a time where we trust no one, which is not the way our religion is even conveyed, because our whole religious tradition is an aspect of trust, right? For people who have an understanding and knowledge of things we don't, right? That's just reality. So when I'm pointing to those books, I'm pointing to all of those men who actually did that. What I'm telling you, those great Imams, they actually did that. They actually read, comprehended, understood, and explained and taught those books. So therefore, they're at a level of what? Understanding to convey what is our faith. So I want to pause there, because that's practically something we can do. The level of actually reading books to know what we're supposed to believe at a foundational level, right? Then there is more in terms of explanation and explaining and understanding. But let's go to the first level, where we actually read and have become familiar with those reliable texts that the Muslim nation agreed upon, so that at least we know what we're supposed to believe. And then we can talk about the details, and Allah knows best.
Alhamdulillah. I would like for our Imam, Amin, to answer this question for me, for the benefit of us all. He mentioned 3 books. He mentioned al-Aqeedah, al-Tahawi, al-Aqeedah al-Nasafiyya, and Jawharat al-Tawhid. Can you give us some comments about al-Baraheen, or i.e. the Sanusi Creed? Like, where do you place that book in relation to the books that you mentioned, and give us some information about that?
So the Sanusi Creed, like al-Baraheen, it was written by the great Imam Muhammad bin Yusuf as-Sanusi, and he died in the year 895. It is a famous text, but it doesn't contain the details of those other books. So it's very, very summarized, to give you, actually it was designed to give you what is absolutely needed to know about belief in God and belief in the prophets, right? It's very, very summarized, and famous. But those other books have a little bit more scope in terms of the creed. So that's why those books are much more widely spread, because they cover more information. However, the issues that are covered in the Sanusi creed, like al-Ibrahim, because he actually has 5 books in Aqeedah. This is one of the small ones. They were made like steps, right? You go from one book to another book to another book to another book till you get into the science of scholastic theology, al-Kalam. And they were authored for that reason, to take the student from beginner to advanced. Those other books, their focal point was to give you the foundational beliefs of the creed of Sincerity wal Jama'ah. But the issues that are conveyed are similar, but with a different purpose. And Allah knows best.
And I have the same question for Qaridatul Bahiyya by Imam ad-Dardir.
Yeah, it has the same purpose. It is of the same purpose. It was written for beginners in the creed. So Imam Dardir wrote for beginners, someone who's starting out. What is the first thing you need to know? Know about the belief in Allah, know about the belief in the prophets. It's written on that level. So that book as well doesn't go into the length of detail of those other 3 books.
So those 2 books, the way you describe them, they are reminding me of other books. Like, for example, Ibn Ashir, he has a poem on fiqh, but in the beginning, he has the bare minimum you need to know with regards to Aqeedah, like what I call like the meat and potatoes of the creed in the beginning. That's all I had for this go around, inshallah.
Yeah, I gotta get ready to go for Maghrib. Do y'all want to take some of these questions?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll put them up. The first one is this one.
Where did the concept of the 3 Tawhids come from? Ibn Taymiyyah or Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab? According to my understanding, and the 2 Imams can correct me, they come from Ibn Taymiyyah, but Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab added to it Tawhid al-Asma wa Sifat, and further changed some definitions with that relates to them. Like, for example, the definition of worship and all of those things. And Imam Fahim kind of like explained it earlier, but that's my understanding. So it wasn't completely Ibn Taymiyyah, and it wasn't completely Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. It was Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab taking what Ibn Taymiyyah had started and added to it and put his own touches on it. Allah knows best.
In a way, and I said, to be fair, there is a word we got to start practicing. Right? It's new Arabic vocabulary for all of us. It's called al-insaf. And al-insaf can be translated as fairness. Right? All of these categorizations, all the scholars had some form of using terminology to define principles that are found in the Quran and the Sunnah. This is normal, right? So terminology in and of itself is not bad. So to say Tawhid al-Rububiyyah or Tawhid al-Uluhiyyah or Tawhid al-Uluhiyyah or Tawhid al-Asma wa Sifat in and of itself is not bad. the words, is what you intend by it. Y'all following us? Because there is Tawhid of Rububiyyah. There is Tawhid of Uluhiyyah. There is Tawhid of Asma wa Sifat. But not as you just understood it. What Ibn Taymiyyah, who died in the year 728 after Hijrah, and Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, who died in the year 1206, what they understood and what they used those terms to accuse the Muslims of is the problem, not the term necessarily itself. How you understood from that term. Because Al-Sunnati wal Jama'ah, when we learn the issues of al-Tawhid, we learn categorization, like everyone else. That's scholarly deduction and put things in a structured form so you can understand it. So we have al-ilahiyat, al-nubuwat, al-sam'iyat, right? Terminology to put the beliefs in a structured way for the common person to understand it. So that in and of itself is not the problem. But when you take it and you use those terms to accuse the vast majority of Muslims as being misguided, or to actually be, as Imam Fahim mentioned, idol worshippers, or grave worshippers, or saint worshippers, or people who deny attributes of Allah and do vile innovation, there's the problem, not the terms. Because you will find these terms in one form or another in Sunni books, right? The term is there. It's how you using the term and why you put it in these categories. What is the understood? So I'm saying that in fairness. So Ibn Taymiyyah, he found these terms in the books of early scholars, and he put them together in a structure that contradict what the majority of Muslims understood from those terms. You follow my point? So it's not like he just pulled it out of his pocket, like, let me give some new terms in Islam. No, he didn't do that. He found these terms and he applied meanings to them that others didn't understand from them before. So he had a vile innovation in the creed that led to Muslims being accused later on in the worst way by Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab as disbelievers, as idol worshippers, as deniers of Allah's attributes, by that categorization, right? Is this point clear? Because I don't want us to think that even lies have a basis in truth. Lies, falsehood, innovation has some basis in the truth. You can find a point where they got it from. And here's one of the most dangerous things I think has happened to us. Name calling. We're so into name calling, that's our excuse for not learning. It's easy for me to say Wahhabi, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, Ibn Taymiyyah, and not deal with the issue. If it's his name, forget the issue. Ignorance. La, that's not how it works. Did I understand the issue? If I understand the issue, no matter if it was Ibn Taymiyyah, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, or anyone who holds their beliefs, Ibn Abi al-Izz, any of them, if you understand the issue, doesn't matter who said it, right? And this is what's happening to us in our community, if I want to bring it up to our time. We got many people saying the same thing in different ways, and we fall for the same banana in the tailpipe because we never understood the issue in the beginning. So when we hear a guy says, for instance, I'm not on that no more, but he has the same beliefs, he's just with a smile now. If you understood the issue and not just the name, he couldn't fool you like that, right? Like there's one noun that is re-emerging, and his whole thing is, I'm different, I'm not like them, but he's saying the same exact stuff. So what changed? Nothing. In reality, what is important? Nothing changed. Because the name was not the issue. Saying Salafi itself is not a bad thing. I wish you did follow the Salaf. We all want to follow the Salaf. What do you understand from Salafi? This the issue. You understand my point? I think that's important when we talk about that. Because Ibn Taymiyyah was a very learned man, far more learned than all of us put together. So we're not arguing about that. That's not a point of disagreement. He was extremely knowledgeable, the likes of which I don't think we got nobody walking on the face of the earth like him. I'm talking about in knowledge, honestly. Like if we put the people we have today in a room with Ibn Taymiyyah, I don't think it'd look right. Ibn Taymiyyah was at a time where Islamic scholarship was like at its height. I mean, in their time, people were a computer. The average scholar of renown, of fame, was himself a walking computer. Like, we be talking about people as if they were like us. No, they were not like us. And if we want to really say they're not like us, they're not like us. For real, they were not like us, right? Not at all. So we got to have some fairness here. Does that mean they're right? No, that means that just dealing with the issue is not just name calling. It has to be deeper than that, right? That doesn't suffice for understanding the issue. So when we're talking about the issue of the categorization of Tawhid into three, it's what it was designed to do. And I'm going to give you the things that it was designed to do. Number one, it was designed to consider the Muslim who made Tawassul, here I come, 1 second, who made Tawassul and Tabarruk. So these are two terms, at-Tawassul and at-Tabarruk. All right, let's hold it there at Tawassul and Tabarruk with these three categories of Tawhid. I have to go pray there, looking at me like they want to beat me up. Please help. I'm being surrounded by Bengalis. It's prayer time, brother. All right, I'm coming. I'll be right back. Hold my thought there.
I got you. I wrote it down, so I won't forget. Imam Fahim?
Yeah, just to reiterate what Imam Amin was saying, the terms themselves are not problematic. Because I think I remember and reading on Imam Muhasibi's Risala lil-Mustarshidin, the treatise for the seekers. I think he uses these terms Rububi and Uluhiyya, so they're not new terms, but it's the classification of the terms, you know. And so with respect to Ibn Taymiyyah, he acknowledged these terms. I don't think he did three categories. I think it was two or maybe three, I think. But he stopped at, you know, where some of the things where he, in the category of uluhiyya, or, you know, the tawhid of worship or a godhood, he refrained from making takfir of the Muslims for these practices that, although he disliked, that he were at odds with, he didn't make takfir of the mass majority of Muslims for these practices, right? And Ibn Abdul Wahhab really kind of capitalized on that. And this discussion you could find in the book of Ibn Abdul Wahhab's brother, Sulaiman, Sheikh Sulaiman. He discusses these things where he is confronting his brother about where he went where the people that he claimed to take from, because by his own admission, Ibn Abdul Wahhab basically said that he preferred Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn al-Qayyim, their works over everybody else's. So like he wouldn't even consider like the early works of the people who came before, because he said, no, in his books that people didn't understand Tawhid until, his time, and stuff like this. So, so his brother was pointing out these people that you have, that you revere, they're not saying the same thing that you said. They're not saying the things that they're not understanding the things that you have put out as Tawhid. And so it was designed really as a political strategy to overtake the area, So if he is basically the same as, just to put it in terms that we can understand, it's the same thing that white folks coming over here and conquering Native Americans, all they had to do was say that they were heathens. And so that justified them as being, or whatever they call them. I think they call them heathens or whatever. And it's the same thing as taking our people from the motherland. Just declare them as heathens. And so that justifies us trying to so-called civilize them. And the same thing happened in the time of Ibn Abdul Wahab. Just declare them as, polytheists, on technicalities, and we have a right to, spill their blood. And so that's the reality of the Wahhabi movement, is that they spilled the blood of Muslims, with these categorization and their understanding of them. Not the word and the categorizations themselves, but how they understood them. So the three categories were definitely from Ibn Abdul Wahhab, and where he really took it to a level that Ibn Taymiyyah didn't go to, and Allah knows best.
Alhamdulillah. Imam Amin, he mentioned 3 books. I'll repeat them again so that you all can write them down if you haven't already. Aqeedah Tahawi. Number 2, al-Aqeedah Nasafiyya. And number 3, Jawharat Tawhid. And I'm mentioning those books because, as he mentioned, these are 3 well-known books among Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, where you can learn the proper creed. But I want to remind us that don't just go run out and buy those books, especially like if you find an English translation someplace. You have to be careful of translators, publishers, and all of those things. Because one of the many things that in our time Wahhabis are notorious for is refuting in the guise of commentating. Refuting in the guise of commentating. I'll give you a famous example from the Aqeedah of Imam Tahawi. In Aqeedah of Imam Tahawi, Imam Tahawi mentions that the 6 directions, up, down, right, left, front, and back, those are the 6 directions, they don't apply to Allah. He says that explicitly in his Aqeedah. The Wahhabis disagree with that. They say Allah is above. That's a direction. So in any of their translations, well, even in their Arabic, but even in their translations of the Aqeedah of Imam Tahawi, when it gets to that point right there, you're going to find them disagreeing with him and refuting him in his own book. They're translating it, they're commenting on it, but at the same time, they're refuting him. Remember Tahawi saying directions don't apply to Allah. One of those directions is above. They say, nah, Allah is clearly above his throne in their commentaries. I have one right behind me. Commentary of Sheikh bin Baz, commenting on Aqeedah of Imam Tahawi. There's a little footnote, and he rejects that point. So we mention names of these books. Don't just get all excited, run out and get it. Oh, you got to be careful. You have to learn those books with teachers with the proper understanding. So I wanted to highlight those things. Also, if you were listening, I asked Imam Amin about two other books that are well known amongst Ahlul Sunnah, which teach the creed. And he mentioned that these books, they're well known, but they don't go into as much detail as the three books that he mentioned. And I'm reminding you of all of this because when you learn Islam properly with qualified teachers who are taking you from the beginning levels and up, even for example, if you learn, like for example, fiqh. Like we're talking about Aqeedah now, but for example, let's say you're learning a basic book of fiqh. And I mentioned, as by way of an example, in the Maliki school, Ibn Ashir, or Murshid al-Mu'in, or what it translates the guiding helper, which is a poem, but it's in primarily in fiqh, but it's like one of the basic books you would study in the Maliki fiqh at the beginning level, along with books like the Akhdari, the Ashmawiyah, and books like that. Ibn Ashir is there on that level. In that book, even though it's a book of fiqh, in the beginning, after the short introduction, and before he gets into fiqh, is a section on creed, Aqeedah. So, in a lot of basic level fiqh books are like this, where the book is about fiqh, but in the beginning, you're getting some basic information about creed. And the Risala of Ibn Abi Zayd, again in the Maliki school, which is a little bit higher than that book, is the same way. After an introduction, you have a section of the book that really can stand alone as an Aqeedah book, a basic Aqeedah book. And so, alhamdulillah. So, well, before I pass it back to Imam Amin, he was talking about the three categories of Tawhid and what they were designed to do. He mentioned the first one, to consider the Muslims who made Tawassul and Tabarruk as disbelievers. But I just wanted to, again, emphasize, now you know the name of some basic books. Don't just go run out and get them from anywhere. Make sure that they've been translated and published by Ahlul Sunnah and that you don't fall for the banana in the tailpipe. So basically check with us before you go out and buy something, right? And especially Aqeedah of Imam Tahawi, we have it. So, there's no need to go anyplace else. But just in case you have you want to go get the other books, inshallah. Bismillah.
We got it for cheap, man.
So the al-Tawassul and al-Tabarruk, they are two practices that are well known among the majority of the Muslims. At-Tawassul is to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by the status of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam or the righteous, right? So that is making dua to Allah and asking Allah by the status, the spiritual rank of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or a companion, or among the righteous people who are known to be righteous people. This is something that Muslims have practiced since the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's one issue. And the other issue is at Tabarruk, which is to seek blessings from the traces of the Prophet ﷺ or the righteous. Also was a practice that happened since the time of the Prophet ﷺ and before. But we're talking about in the Sharia. So these two practices, Ibn Taymiyyah considered that they are doors to polytheism or shirk, right? And Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab later came and actually just straight out called it a shirk al-akbar, right? Great shirk. And Ibn Taymiyyah, though he had a similar idea, it wasn't as severe and extreme that Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab took it and what it led to, which is the actual killing of Muslims. We didn't find that in the time of Ibn Taymiyyah, even though he disagreed with certain aspects of these practices. So from this issue, it led to considering Muslims as non-Muslims and also made their blood permissible, so their property was taken. So their life and property was no longer sacred, and it fit into their political agenda, which is a whole long discussion. So it led to many atrocities that Muslims know very well from the hands of those who had those understandings, which we still suffer from today. All the terrorism in the world that we see from those people who claim to be Muslims came from these ideas. So you want to know how we live in the world we live in, is these ideas in our modern time. The same books, the same concept is what led to that. The other issue, so that relates to Tawhid al-Rububiyyah and Tawhid al-Uluhiyyah, why they needed that division, right? The third aspect, Tawhid al-Asma wa Sifat, it is to consider as misguided those who do not have literalist understandings of the attributes of Allah. And it led to say that anything that is not literalism, such as figurative interpretation or leaving the meaning to Allah, they consider as denying the attributes of Allah. And this is how they carved out their special creed, through that categorization. So what they was intending to do actually was to excommunicate Muslims so they could serve their political aim at the end. That's what it ended up being. But the basis of it is these issues. And these issues are a vile innovation, right, in the creed. And when you read the history of Islam, you will see that all of these practices that are being condemned by this categorization of a Tawhid was normal practices among Muslim scholars and laymen alike since the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even the companions actually did these things. So you know that's something we should look at. And Allah knows best.
Imam, Amin, my apologies. The question I asked last time was about the difference between Zahiriyya, Wahhabiyya, and Salafiyya in creed, because I thought they were all the same.
The Zahiriyya are well-known people who didn't necessarily deal with Aqeedah in these issues. The original Zahiriyya were people who were literate and that related to al-fiqh, not necessarily to the creed, because the creed of like a leader of the Zahiriyya in our context, when they say Zahiriyya, who they're talking about, is followers of Ibn Hazm. And Ibn Hazm didn't have the belief of the Wahhabiyya or of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. He didn't have his creed. He had issues of jurisprudence that were very problematic. But so I think that's where people mix. They mix between Aqeedah and fiqh. The Zahiriyya is not a madhab of Aqeedah. It's a madhab in fiqh. Right? Al-Wahhabiyya is a madhab in Aqeedah. Right? Salafiyya, as understood, is really about Aqeedah, not about fiqh. The Wahhabis, the Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab and his they're Hanbali in fiqh. They are Hanbali. And they follow the Hanbali school. Do they have their own prefaces in certain legal rulings? Yes. But in general, they're Hanbalis. They read Hanbali books, Hanbali scholars, Hanbali chains of narration, same stuff, right? But their creed is different. In fact, when the Wahhabis explain Hanbali books, they'll always make a note to correct the Aqeedah of the author of those original relied upon books. So for instance, if they're quoting al-Buhuti, for instance, Sheikh Mansour al-Buhuti, the great Hanbali scholar from Egypt, who died in the year 1051 AH, 1051 AH. He was a great Egyptian scholar. When they start explaining his books, you're going to find them saying, oh, he was influenced by the Ash'aris, right? Because of the way he explains. So you'll find that. And when they, in all of those great books, because those great Hanbali scholars were either from Egypt or Sham or Baghdad, and you will find that they didn't have Wahhabi understanding of the attributes of Allah, right? So there is a difference. But the books that they use as reliable books to teach are those books written by those scholars. So they do the same thing like they do for Imam al-Nawawi's books, or al-Hafiz ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, or any great scholar, al-Qurtubi, al-Tabari. They say, yeah, he was good in all this, but he had bad Aqeedah. You know, so it's the same thing in the Hanbali. The Salafiyya group that's like La Madhabi, the Wahhabis don't support that. I mean, it works for the Aqeedah side, but for that not following the madhab stuff, they don't accept at all. And their scholars, the leading scholars of the followers of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, they are Hanbali. They don't accept that. And even some of them are so strict that they'll mention this is the Hanbali position and this is the independent opinion of so-and-so or so-and-so. And so it's not the madhab. To that point, right? So I think it's something we should, you know, when we use, don't mix apples and oranges, right? And be able to understand the issues. So when you got Wahhabi and Salafi, the Salafi and the Wahhabi are going to come together in the creed, in the issues of the creed. That's where they're going to come together. But in other issues, they may not come together at all. So they're same in some issues. The Zahiriyya may be the same in some fiqh positions, right? Because Imam Ibn Hazm didn't follow one of the four schools. So the Salafiyya will pick that up. But it's fiqh, it's not Aqeedah. And Allah knows best.
Yeah, since that was addressed directly to you, no need to follow up.
Question: is this book different from your book by Imam Tahawi Abu Hafs Sirajuddin al-Ghaznawi, translated and annotated by Amjad Mahmood?
Oh, that book is a commentary on the Tahawi. So the basic text is the Creed of Tahawi, and Al-Ghaznawi was a great Hanafi scholar who commented and explained the Creed of a Tahawi. So in that book, you have an explanation. The Creed of a Tahawi is the actual text that he's explaining, which is the same as what Imam Naim translated. But I think Imam Naim's translation is more safer because it's sensitive to the issues we confront, where the translator of that text may not be confronted exactly what we're confronted with in America. So it'd be more loose in his translation in some areas. So the safer translation would be the translation that Imam Naim mentioned. But even in that text, he explains, and Imam al-Ghaznawi explains, but maybe sometimes the translations don't hit the mark, especially when we're already predisposed to bad understandings of creed or bad translations of words. Well, they had the questions tonight, huh?
Sheikh Ashra Rashid, Hafidhullah, said in a lecture on the creed by Imam at-Tahawi that the Ahlul Sunnah and the Wahhabis could come to terms or a middle course of the creed of Imam Tahawi. I wonder why he said that. Do one of you Imams know why he may have said that?
Yeah, I talked to him specifically about this issue. It lays a foundation, as we said, that all of us accept. If we take out the explanations and just say what Imam Tahawi said, we accept. They won't do that, by the way. They will never do that because they think Imam Tahawi was mistaken in some points, right? So they don't accept. So, but he's an Imam that is well known. So they will read his text and then explain away certain points. Like when he said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala la tahwi jihatu sita kasair mubtada'at, that Allah is not contained by the 6 directions. They don't agree with that. So they're going to say Imam Tahawi was mistaken here, right? When he says وَمَنْ وَصَفَ اللَّهَ بِمَعْنٍ مِنْ مَعَانِ الْبَشَرِ فَقَدْ كَفَرَ, they don't agree with that. So they're going to explain that away. So even though they'll recite it, but they'll explain it away. Whereas the Sunnis are going to accept it as Imam Tahawi said it without explaining it away. So even though that's true in one sense, that we all agree that this is the Sunni creed, the Wahhabiyya, at those points, they disagree with Imam Tahawi. So that's why that doesn't work. I wish it was that simple, but it won't work. Because they think Imam Tahawi was deviant in creed, may Allah forgive him. That's what they say. He deviated from the creed of the Salaf, may Allah forgive him. There's forgiveness for the great scholars, but no forgiveness for us. The ones who should be blamed for not understanding are given a pass, and the ones that's understandable why they don't understand is torture. Ya Latif.
Yeah, if I may add on to that question, I think what he may have meant, and Allah knows best, is that if we sit down and have a discussion and go really by the text that Wahhabis and so-called Atharis claim to do, then they have to come to terms with some of the mistakes that they've been making, in these issues of creed. If you're going to go through the books of the Salaf and saying that you follow the Salaf, aka Salafiyah, so-called, then you'll come to a middle ground, and you have to humble yourself and know that you've been deprived. You've been taking texts, really based on certain interpretations that don't even reach the Salaf. For instance, if you're going to sit down and discuss these things and come to a middle ground, then you have to say things like, okay, when we're talking about the Shah of Imam Tahawi, you don't rely on Ibn Abul Izz's Shah. When you have Ghaznawi's and other ones that preceded it, they explain it correctly, and things like that. You follow what I'm saying? And so maybe in that sense, but I would have to see the actual lecture that you were talking about. If you could send it to me, inshallah, then I'll get the chance to review it.
I don't know if they're looking. Can we come back to this one? I want to. Imam Fahim, you were having a conversation with one of the people on YouTube, so people only on YouTube see it.
Okay.
But I wanted to address what the brother called militant Ash'arism. I am not militant. I am a peaceful man. Look where he gets that from. Listen.
I know where you get it from, but let me see what you're going to say.
Listen. Explaining is nothing wrong with that. A soft approach may not work at all in clarifying. So explaining and making things clear is not militant. It's learning your religion. And because someone is explicit doesn't mean they're offensive. It means they're clear, right? And when what we deal with, put everything in context, we're dealing with what you're talking about every single day, coming at the creed of Islam, the creed of Ahl-Sunnati wal Jama'ah, right? So we answer, we explain, and many people benefit from these explanations. They had no idea of the mistakes that was existing until we started talking. Had we remained silent, they would not have a clue. Many people, and we meet them all over the country, in fact, all over the world. So it's extremely important that we clarify. Because people don't know and don't understand well and don't have a firm footing, should not be put on everyone else. So we explain the creed of Ahl-Sunnati wal Jama'ah. We explain the creed of the Ash'ariyah and the Maturidiyya. And because the other person is lacking in that area, doesn't make us aggressive. It means you should learn more and you should be able to clarify and do the job. That's it, right? So for our brother, I would suggest to you, because if we had a real conversation, it wouldn't last 10 minutes before you would change your mind after we finish talking to you. But it's easy in the comments to just talk and talk. But if we had a real conversation, like about the issues you're talking about, and we discuss them, you will have no choice, if you are really Sunni, to say, you know what, I'm wrong, you're right. If I put it in text, and I can prove it to you in 10 minutes, if you got, and I won't say 10 minutes, if you would like, we would talk to you live right now. In 10 minutes, if you really Sunni, I will show you, and you will agree that what we're doing is not blameworthy. In 10 minutes. Because you mentioned Sheikh, and all of these people I learned from. You talking about Sheikh Saeed Folder. You talking about the Bad Alawi's. You don't know the Bad Alawi's. You don't know the Bad Alawi's at all. If you think the Bad Alawi's are accepting Wahhabi or Salafi creed and are silent about it, you don't know the Bad Alawi's. And I study with the Bad Alawi's. They are not silent at all. In fact, some of them are stronger and they're more explicit than us. So, I have to be honest with you when I say this. Listen, when we say Black Imams Roundtable, we have a context. And every people in every land who've been victims of Wahhabi aggression, they speak out. But when the black man speaks out, all of a sudden he's militant and aggressive. No. We have the right just like everyone else, to protect our Islam, to protect our creed, to protect our children. And just because many people don't speak up doesn't mean all of us should remain silent. Because you don't disagree. You just disagree that we're vocal. You don't disagree with the issue. And if you disagree with the issue, then we should have another conversation. And if you like, we can give you the link and you're welcome to express yourself. You don't got to keep typing. Because we can have a conversation. We're family. We're brothers. We mean it. But if you want, you're welcome. Let me move that. Here's the link. You can come and express what you're saying. So maybe we misunderstanding you. And I'll show you firsthand, like what we're talking about. And since you agree, let's have the conversation. And let's see how you suggest to explain. And then let us explain the context and let's explain the details and then see if you still feel the same way. So if you want, you're welcome. You can come.
I think he kind of clarified it a little bit. He said he don't really know the context in which we discuss, you know. So we got a right to be hostile, man. Our people are being religiously persecuted.
That's why he's the Imam of the boom bap.
Is that public enemy?
Yes.
Huh?
Is that public enemy?
That's PE, man.
Okay.
Professor Griff, more specifically.
No, seriously. People don't learn their creed because too many people are quiet. No one says nothing. Don't talk about the creed. People are being misguided, and you know it. What do you mean don't talk about the creed? And the ones who are spreading a creed that contradicts the creed of Al-Sunnah wal Jama'ah are extremely vocal. I know some people who know that's the case and still blame us. I'm like, come on, bro. You cannot be serious. You know what they say. You know what they're doing, and you still criticize us for speaking the truth? Come on, man. And it's not like we're not having the conversation. We're not trying to, like, let's really have the conversation. It's not about putting no one down. It's not, no, let's just have the real conversation.
You see the comment the brother put on YouTube? He said, honest conflict is better than dishonest harmony.
Okay.
Yeah, that's powerful, man. MashaAllah.
And listen, we have friends that are Wahhabi. That we all right. We don't fight. We have real talk, but we don't fight. We get an understanding.
Some of our best friends are Wahhabi.
We have great diplomatic relations with Wahhabis. I want to ask something too, but I think we should get to the questions. We got any other questions?
We only got one question left.
Okay.
Are Salafis and Hanbalis? Here he come. MashaAllah. Well, you got to wait now.
He's coming on?
There you go, right there. Assalamu alaikum, Murad.
Assalam. You hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I think it's in the sound.
Boy, we can hear you, but barely. Can you get a clear voice? Hello?
Okay, I need to shut off the.
You good.
No, I'm Imam's just.
Wait, introduce yourself, Murad. We don't know who you are.
My name is Murad Ali. I'm born and raised in Canada, in the city of Ottawa.
Okay.
And I'm from Djibouti origin, or even better to say Somali origin.
Okay.
So, I've come on your streams quite a few times and expressed a similar criticism, you would say. You guys are tackling the issues like head on, and I think it's just, I feel like that's more pushing away the masses from what you guys are offering. Allah alam, I don't know about the fruits and the messages you guys are getting or the feedback you guys are getting. I'm not sure about that, but like if I were to use a similar approach within my community and just come and like a hard dealing with every specific issue of debate between Ash'aris and Salafis, that would put a mark on me, pretty much. You know what I mean?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I'm going to be very technical with you. So if you don't know, say I don't know. If you know, then speak. You know, so I'm not trying to trap you, but I got to be technical so we can understand. So you're from the Somali area, right?
Yes.
What was the creed of the Somalis prior to the year 1206 after Hijrah, which is the death of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahab? Before that, what was the creed of the vast majority of Somali Muslims?
Ash'aris.
Ash'aris.
Yeah, they used to study 7 books.
Okay, what were the 7 books?
Including some Maturidi text.
Okay, what were the 7 books of Ash'ari? Do you know?
Kharidatul Bahiyya.
Kharidatul Bahiyya.
Al-Barahim.
Al-Barahim.
They used to study Al-Aqeedah Nasafiyya.
Al-Aqeedah Nasafiyya. Go ahead.
Bad al-Amali.
Bad al-Amali. Go ahead.
And so on and so forth.
Okay, so all of those are Ash'ari and Maturidi texts.
Yes.
Was that the vast majority of Somali or even Ethiopia, all of that area, was that the vast majority of those Muslims?
Well, the vast majority of the city dwellers that studied in the Masjid, that's the creeds they took. And all those attached to the Mashayikh. Okay,
and those outside who were Muslims, they had a different creed?
No, they just didn't study these books.
They had the same creed. That was the creed of Somaliland, right?
Yes.
Okay, how did it change?
During the Civil War, a lot of the students went to oil-rich countries.
What's oil-rich countries?
Namely Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia. What happened in going to Saudi Arabia?
Then they were taught the Wahhabi creed. They were taught the creed of the Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab.
And what is that creed?
Tajsim, pretty much.
What is Tajsim?
Well, equating Allah to Allah's attributes to human attributes, bodily, physical attributes.
Is that and that's what they were taught in Saudi Arabia?
They were taught, that's what they were taught, yeah.
Okay. What was the result of that after being taught that?
The result of that's what spread.
Spread where?
In our country.
So they came from a country that from the time of their having Islam and their creed for almost 1,000 years, they had a creed.
Yes.
And then after the Civil War, some people go to Saudi Arabia, they learn a different creed, they come back to the country, and what was the result of that on the country?
Well, especially the most vocal ones are Wahhabi now. And even though there's now a noticeable shift that people are slowly, because there was also the push of La Madhabiyya, that the people did not follow the schools of fiqh. That quickly, I think over time, people realize that that's just not sustainable.
Right.
Well, people are studying the madhab even within Wahhabi circles. And at first they had to go study under the Sufis, quote unquote. And they had to get
because you said they were Ash'ari. What madhab were they in fiqh in Somalia?
Shafi'i.
What were they Sufis?
They were Sufis as well. There was two
so
main.
All together, they were Ash'ari, Shafi'i, and Sufi.
Yes.
So don't forget that. And that was their practice for 1,000 years. Am I right or wrong?
Yes. No.
So you're telling me in the 13th century, after having something for almost 1,000 years,
yes,
someone goes to Saudi Arabia, they came back to Somalia, and considered all of the Muslims for 1,000 years to be what?
Mushrikeen, pretty much.
Mushrikeen, which is kuffar in actuality, right? Idol worshippers.
but it didn't reach that because listen, they use a lot of mechanisms. They عذر بالجهل, and they consider the masses to be excused by way of ignorance, and
But that doesn't negate
the fact,
that
yeah,
someone is kafir. They just saying we're not going to. What you doing is kufr, but because of other bijahal, we excuse you of ignorance. We're not going to call you a kafir. But
I don't think that type of takfir was ever there. Like the early Wahhabis, that type of takfir was never there.
so it's bid'ah, right? Not kufr, but bid'ah.
Yes, they became a bit softer. Yeah.
Okay, so at the end of the day, you told a tradition of 1,000 years of books, memorization, chains of narration, and every science of the religion, right? Every science, right?
Yes.
It got wiped out to where now you're trying to find a revival. Is that what you're telling me?
Exactly.
So people who remain silent will ultimately get wiped out from what you just said, right?
Yes, and I'm not saying be silent, Imam.
Follow me though. I'm just saying follow me. If
Yes.
I listen to your reasoning,
Yes.
because the Somali sheikhs, those scholars were the most gentle people walking the face of the earth.
Alhamdulillah.
But when they came in the face of these harsh, real militant extremists in their ideas,
Yes.
it wiped out their whole tradition for 1,000 years. Do you think we should allow the same thing to happen to us? And we don't have a 1,000-year tradition. We don't even have a 100-year tradition. So if you're telling me they came and wiped out a 1,000-year tradition with scholars of Hadith, scholars of fiqh, scholars of Tasawwuf, scholars of Arabic language, scholars of logic, scholars of Sirah, scholars of every Islamic science were in Somalia and Ethiopia, and they wiped them clean. What do you think they'll do to the African American community?
صح إمامنا. يعني I agree with you, like 100%. I stand behind you in that respect. It's just maybe in terms of approach, and I don't know how you are in the ground. We just see you an hour and a half on the screen. You on the ground, it may be a totally different ball game, which I'm not aware of. But I feel like if we start carrying labels like a badge, and we are now kind of like in our masajids, these are the Ash'aris, these are the Salafis. Okay, I preach a method of let's deal with the masail, and let's just deal with the masail, and let's leave the labels or put the labels on somewhere, for a minute. And just because as soon as you label yourself or you start brandishing a flag of Ash'ariyah, khalas, the people are not listening to you because the Ash'ari brand is so tarnished by these people.
But can I ask you a question?
Yes.
How did you know that the Somalis for 1,000 years were Ash'ari, Shafi'i, Qadiri in Sufism? How did you know that if they didn't say it?
So I came up, my father was those three, my grandmother was those three. That was the deen we were raised on,
And your grandfather, great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather was the same too, right?
Yes, my grandmother, she used to sing poetry about Al-Ghawth, Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, and she didn't memorize the Quran, but she knew these poetries by heart. Like, she didn't memorize the entire Quran, but yeah.
Right. So they did have it well known. The names were well known. The paths were known. The scholars were known, and it was no problem until those people invaded your country with their ideas and wiped your whole tradition out. Right? That's what you're telling me, right?
Yes, but now we need to.
But they were using those titles. Follow me. They were using those titles without any censoring for 1,000 years. How did 1,000 years of a normative tradition in a land become to be blameworthy where we shouldn't even say it no more? Because they said the name and the issues, and the fact that they did it over 1,000 years, it reached you. Why would we do that? And now think about this. Let me give you us. Let's put it in context.
Yes.
Our people predominantly were Ash'ari, Maliki, Qadiri in Africa, West Africa, where most of us came from that are now in North America, right? Those invaders of the European came in that land, took us out as slaves, wiped us clean. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala manna alayna bil Islam ba'da dhalik. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala favored us with Islam after that. And now when we got Islam, it was that version. That's what we learned as Islam. Some of us went abroad. Some of us studied. Some of us sat with sheikhs. Some of us sat with those scholars from Somalia and Ethiopia and different places. And we learned, wait a minute, this was our tradition. They snatched it from us. And the way we revive it is by being explicit, just like your great-grandfather and your great-great-grandfather and great-great-grandmother. That's what I'm saying. The same concept, it worked for them, except that someone stopped doing it after they were overpowered by those oil-rich countries. We're in America. We should do the same thing to preserve our. Do you understand my point?
I do.
We want to follow the tradition too.
But one thing I want to ask, that we know that the layman, technically speaking, he has no madhab. So these labels, they cause more confusion for him than they do benefit him. Or, these labels, they're useful as like a marja. He knows this is what I should return to, and this is what I should get my deen from. In terms of aqeedah, I should get it from here, and in terms of fiqh, I should get it from here, and in terms of their maraja, places to go back to for them. So it's good for them to know that. But now they're confused, though.
But I don't think they're confused. I think we just need to explain, and they won't be confused. Because when you said the common person, al-ami laysa lahu madhab, the common person doesn't have, the layman doesn't have a madhab. Why? Because the station of the layman is taqleed, of a person who is mujtahid, who has a methodology. So that is, he's following the methodology of whoever gives him the religious judgment. The person who's giving him a religious judgment has all those titles you telling us to let down. So if he's going to follow as returning to someone, he's a layman. He's going to follow the judgment of a mujtahid scholar. That mujtahid scholar is either going to be Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, Hanbali, Ash'ari, Maturidi, or from the Fudala min al-Hanabila. That's going to be who he's going to refer to. So at the end of the day, those titles will remain. Am I right?
So you're saying, Imam, that we shouldn't take a soft approach in trying to wean the masses off Wahhabiyya.
I don't think the masses even know what Wahhabiyya is. I think the masses have what we call default Wahhabism.
Yes.
That's a default setting. It means your program is messed up. It ain't you. Let's fix that programming. Let's change it to the normal station. And now the people will see when we teach them that you have this rich history, because that's what I said to you. You have this rich history that these people who ain't been around for 250 years yet have wiped out the whole tradition of Islam.
Okay.
So what I'm saying, if we explain that to people, not in we being hostile, but they're so hostile that don't even want you to have the conversation. You don't even want me to know my parents, my grandfather, my great-grandfather. They don't want me to know what my religious persuasion was, what was my belief, what was my practice, they want all that to be wiped out and replace it with something that doesn't even have a 250-year track record. And we should be quiet. I mean, when I say be quiet, I mean be quiet to the extent that we don't clarify this issue that you know well. You just spoke of a historic record, and that record is in every Islamic country. Why should we be quiet?
No.
And when I say be quiet, let's say it in a way that no one knows what we're talking about. That's what it ends up.
Yes. Okay.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Now, I'm honestly now. It makes sense. I'm going to ask you a question, Imam. This is the internet now, but outside of the internet, how do you feel like we should approach this, because we have people that are confused, and even students of knowledge that are confused, that because a lot of our brothers here, Somalis, they go and they study from those universities that we spoke about still till today.
What universities? I don't know what you're talking about. Be explicit.
Okay, Medina University, the Medina, Jami'atul Medina.
So what other universities you talking about besides that?
The university in Saudi, all the Saudi universities. Basically.
Okay, so you're talking about a specific place. How many other universities around the world to learn Islam?
Yeah, there's many, alhamdulillah.
Way more than them, right?
Yes, but I'm talking about these are the guys coming back and that have the pulpits now.
Okay, so what are you doing with that rich 1,000-year tradition? Why do they have the pulpit and y'all have a 1,000-year tradition of the foremost greatest scholars in the history of Islam? Huffaz, Fuqaha, Mutakallimun, Sufis, Nahwiyun, Lughawiyun. You have all of this in your history. Why aren't y'all studying it and defending the religion? How do some people who go to a 4-year university that is an inferior university in terms of Islamic knowledge come back and take over your whole country with all these scholars and learned people? What are we doing wrong?
Sheikh, wallahi, you're right. That's
something's wrong here.
Yeah.
That's like a dwarf coming to beat up a giant. What is the giant doing wrong? Maybe the giant is being too soft. That's why that dwarf is beating him up like that. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe the giant has become like a sheep and the dwarf has become like a wolf. So maybe the giant needs to reclaim his greatness and the dwarf won't even be able to harm him. If you understand my point.
Yes, 100%. That's clear. Wadah.
So what I'm saying, why don't we stop being intimidated by nothing? They don't have anything to intimidate us with. Maybe they're smarter than me and you, maybe, right? But are they smarter than our scholars if we learn who our scholars are? If we learn just one of the scholars in for instance, in Somalia, those great ulama who memorize books like we memorize al-Fatiha, why don't we talk about that? How many scholars that you have that memorize books in Aqeedah, books in fiqh, books in tasawwuf, books in Arabic language, books in logic, books memorize, not reading books from the mind? How many scholars y'all have in your tradition like that?
Thousands.
And you got a guy that comes back with a 4-year university, 4-year degree from that university and comes out, wipes out that tradition. Aren't we doing something wrong here?
But one thing though.
And wait a minute, wipe it out with your books.
Yes. One thing, should we focus on debating them on these issues that are always going to be contentious? Mawlid, istighatha, tawassul. If we, or the masses won't even benefit from these debates, or it won't benefit them in their daily lives, or they're being threatened by things way bigger than inter-religious debates.
But here's my point. Let's not debate. Teach them our religion. Teach them, because all this is in our tradition. All this that we're talking about was a part of your tradition. It was normal. Everyone learned it when people used to teach it. When you stopped teaching it and someone else came and teach something else, they stripped you of your whole religion. They stripped you of your whole tradition and you let it happen. And now you find yourself apologizing for something that was normal. I'm saying to you, let's not do that no more.
But even
let's just teach our tradition as it is, and we don't have to fight, but we're going to teach our tradition as it is. We're not going to alter it. We're not going to change the name. We're going to do what we do. They can do whatever they want, but they ain't going to enforce on us to change their tradition. Now, let me ask you the reverse question.
Yes.
Is any of them going to stop saying Salafiyya and this is shirk and bid'ah and kufr? And is they going to stop that? Do you see that forthcoming?
No, never. They're never going to stop.
So why would, and that's falsehood. Why would we, speaking the truth, go silent? Make it. I'm
You're
trying
100% right, Imam.
understand how you make that make sense.
You cannot stop them from they will not stop speaking. So we have to speak loud and clear.
Exactly. That's all I'm saying.
I
We
agree.
agree.
I agree.
So now, instead of now, and I'm not saying you got to be hostile, because Tasawwuf is going to teach us good manners, going to teach us insaf, going to teach us all this stuff. But we're going to speak the truth. As the Prophet sallallahu wasallam alayhi said, قُلِ الْحَقِّ وَلَوْ كَانَ مُرًّا. Speak the truth even if it's bitter. Right? And as Imam Ahmed said, when they asked him the same question, why don't you just be quiet? Al-Mu'tazila is there, let them just go away. He said, إِذَا سَقَتَ الْعَالِمْ فِي وَجْهِ الْبَاطِلِ فَمَتَى يَظْهَرُ الْحَقِّ. If the scholar remains silent in the face of falsehood, when is the truth ever going to be manifest? That's the station of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Imam Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. He wasn't silent. And the people of Tasawwuf, they said, As-sakitu anil haq fi wajhi al-batil shaitan akhras. Is that what we should be? Shaitan akhras? That's what you suggest?
No, never. But Imam, would
The
you?
one who remains silent in the face of falsehood is a tongueless devil. Should we be tongueless devils? No. Well, iyadu billah, we shouldn't. That doesn't mean we got to be mean. That doesn't mean we got to be hostile. Was I hostile to you? Was I mean to you?
No.
We're just talking. We're explaining. We're having a conversation. Why we can't have the conversation? Are we that intimidated?
No. Would you say that like on the ground, we kind of get the wrong image when you're on your podcast and just speaking to a large audience? Is your approach different when you're within your community or?
No, my approach is worse in my community. I am real soft here. Anyone who know me, oh no. Because now I'm dealing with you face to face. We're having a real, here I don't know you. I can't see you. I don't know the impact. So I got to tone down. But face to face, we're men. We can handle it.
Inshallah, they allow me to.
And guess what?
Go ahead. Yeah.
When I first came back to my city, and as Sunnati wal Jama'ah was like wiped out. Like you Sunnis would just stay inside. There was no talking, no ashari. You didn't even hear none of that. When we came back, walillahi alhamd, and we started speaking, right now, whenever you think of Atlantic City, New Jersey, you think of Masjid Muhammad, and you think of the Asharis, and the Maturidis, and the Hanafis, and the Malikis, and the Shafis, and the Hanbalis, and the people of Tasawwuf, because we weren't silent. And in this city, the voice of Islam in the public eye is the voice of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. And even if we're outnumbered by those, but we're not the silent ones, they're the silent ones. And when we speak, it is an authoritative speech, and everyone knows they Sunnis over there. That's Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. And we're not silent. We don't back down. We don't harm no one, but we're straight. We're straightforward. And guess what? Many people now in this area and around the country are proud to say I'm Ashari, or I'm Maturidi, I'm Sunni, I'm Shafi. They have someone who's a voice for them. So we see the opposite. We don't see a voice that says, oh, calm down. We see, please help us out. We need y'all brothers to keep it going. And we've been doing this, and I'll give you an example right now. We're having this conversation. We've been on here for 2 hours and 29 minutes. And do you know there's over 100 people that follow us and they stay on just on this platform and they don't go nowhere? It just grows because they're learning stuff that no one else they can't find. And it should not be like that because there are more Sunnis than there are Wahhabis. there are more Ash'aris, there are more Maturidis than there are Wahhabis and Salafis in the world. Is that true? You just described it in Somali, right?
Yes, yes.
So why is it that this small minority that doesn't even make up 10% of the Muslim nation so strong, and the ones who are the majority, the vast, Jamhur al-Ummah, hum al-Asha'ira wal-Maturidiyya, as Muhammad Murtada az-Zabidi said, إذا أطلق أهل السنة والجماعة المراد بهم الأشاعرة والماتريدية. When you say Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, what is meant is the Ash'aris and the Maturidis. He was the Hafid in Egypt during the time of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahab, Sheikh Muhammad Murtada az-Zabidi. He was the seal of the Arabic linguist. He said it explicitly in his book Ithaf al-Sadat al-Muttaqeen bi Sharh Ihya Ulumuddin. If he could say it, if Imam al-Haddad said it in his book Risalat al-Mu'awwana, he mentioned the Ash'aris and the Maturidis. He said it. Imam al-Haddad, you said Ba'alawis. Imam al-Haddad mentioned in the section on Aqeedah, in his book Risalat al-Mu'awwana, he mentioned Ahl-Sunnati wal Jama'ah, al-Firqat al-Najiyah, al-Asha'ira wal-Maturidiyya. He mentioned it explicitly. Why can he say it? Why can all of your scholars say it? Why can the great scholars of Egypt, the great scholars of Sham, the great scholars of Hadramaut, the great scholars of India and Pakistan, why can they all say it, but the black man in America has to remain silent?
Astaghfirullah, don't, Sheikh, Imam.
No, I'm just being honest, because no one is telling them to be quiet. It's all in their books. It's all in their schools. They build institutions. They write it. I can show you book after book after book after book after book. Hatta, even in Chechnya, in 2016, I believe it was, they had a mass convention of all the scholars of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah around the world in Chechnya. They had from every part. They joined and they said Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah are the Ash'aris and the Maturidis. Not only that, they went to another extent. They said no Wahhabis allowed. No one censored them. That was Al-Azhar, that was the Ba'alawis, that was the Qadiris, the Shadhalis, the Naqshbandis, from every single country around the world. But when it came to the black man in America, who's being dominated by the same thing you're talking about, tell us to be quiet. I'm not saying it's racist to you. I'm not saying it. I'm just saying, does that seem fair? Y'all can send your greatest scholars to declare that Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah are the Ash'aris and the Maturidis and the Sufis, and when it comes to us, be quiet. That's facts. You are aware of the big convention they had in Chechnya, right? You're aware of that, right?
Yes, I'm aware, yes.
So why can they do it and you tell us to be silent? And we're just three black men. That was hundreds of scholars. Why didn't they tell them be quiet? Why didn't they tell them, you know, hey, don't say Ash'ari Maturidi?
No, Imam, I'm definitely not ever going to say to you guys to be silent, you know, inshallah. Speak.
You said don't say Ash'ari and Maturidi. You did say that.
No, I said don't be militant, but...
We're not militant.
Yeah, but...
We never hurt no one.
No, I think I'm ready to be militant too now.
I told you would agree with me.
Yes. Yes.
Listen.
Power to the people.
We don't need you to be militant. We need you to be learned and to convey your tradition.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
To convey your tradition as you learn it, to learn it well, to learn those books, and to teach. And to join us. Because you're welcome. You see, I just let you in and said, come on, let's talk. Let's talk. We need help. In your Somali communities, you need to be there. Imam Naim and Imam Fahim just came back from your Somali community in Columbus, Ohio. And the children are under attack. They taught them. They asked us to come to Minnesota, to different places where there's Somali children that are under attack. And their elders, they set it up for them to learn. So they realize the problem too, right?
Inshallah, Imam, I'm in the process of learning, and I intend to benefit the community.
So send me a message so we can stay in contact. Just you see you on YouTube or Facebook. I don't know if you on Facebook. You on YouTube. Do you get on Facebook?
No, not Facebook. Inshallah, what email?
Yeah, I'm going to give you. Send us a message so we can stay in contact with you. Let's work together.
Inshallah, no, we're together.
Hold on.
And I'm also black, so don't.
I didn't say he wasn't black. You said
An American, but
that's obvious.
I won't stop my black people from preaching the haqq, Yeah.
All right, so there, send me a message, inshallah, with your email and your number, and we'll talk. Let's work together.
There's this problem within the Somali community. Are you black or are you Somali? And I said, I grew up in the inner city here too. When the police looked at us, they didn't see Somali. They saw us as black people.
Right. But right now, for our purposes, we need to see us as Ahl-Sunnati wal Jama'ah, Al-Ash'ira wal Maturidiyya, fil Aqeedah, wa Hanafiyya wal Malikiyya, wa Shafi'iyya, wal Hanabila fil Fiqh, wa Ahl al-Tasawwuf. هذا أهل السنة والجماعة. هذا جمهور الأمة. This is the majority of the Muslim nation. That's what we need to see right now. Yes. We always deal with the black issue. That's a whole big thing. But let's get our religious stuff right. Let us be normal. You said you named those books, and you see how I named those books with you, and we talked about the scholars. Let's make that normal in our communities. How about restoring that great Ahl-Sunnati wal Jama'ah tradition? How about we work together on that?
Inshallah.
Put our hands together, Yad Allahi fawqa al-Jama'ah. Wa man shadda ila an-nar. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His protection is on the Jama'ah, the majority. Whoever deviates from the hellfire. I want to leave you with a hadith, right? I want to leave you with a hadith. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, Inna Allah la yajma'u ummati ala dalala. فَإِذَا رَأَيْتُمْ اِخْتِلَافًا فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِالسَّوَادِ الْأَعْظَمِ. Salawatullahi wa salam alayhi. He said that Allah will never allow my nation to agree on misguidance. Whenever you see difference, فَإِذَا رَأَيْتُمْ اِخْتِلَافًا فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِالسَّوَادِ الْأَعْظَمِ. Then you follow the majority of this nation. From your own testimony, the majority of this nation are the Ash'ira and the Maturidiyya. So let's follow.
Barakallah feekum, Imam.
I'm sorry to keep you late, and I love you, and don't be a stranger. But please send us the information. The thing is in there so we can stay in contact and be a support for one another.
Imam Faheem, Imam Na'im, Barakallah feekum.
We really appreciate having you on, man. It's very informative.
Okay, time to go, y'all. Y'all ready? I think we don't have any more questions.
Just like that. Wait up, man. Hold up, man.
This is overtime, boy. You think I'm worried about the Wahhabis? I got a wife.
Yeah, this is black time for real. We over welcome. I mean, overstepping our bounds.
This is one question: are the Salafis Hanbalis? Imam Naeem, where you go?
Are Salafis Hanbalis? Yeah, when they pick and choose, yes. But as a tradition, no.
On the ground, it depends on who you talk to. Some people who self-identify as Salafis, some of them are against madhabs, and some of them, many of them, claim the Hanbali school. So on the ground, and if you understand the Wahhabi, the Wahhabiyah and the different strands within them, you will understand why some of them claim madhabs and some of them don't. But Imam Amin touched on it a little bit earlier, that strand that's from Al-Albani, they are hardcore against madhabs.
And you finished on that one, Imam? Yeah, and so you got to see how the Salafis, they only really relate to Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal with respect to his hadith knowledge, and so that's why they identify with Imam Ahmed. But as far as fiqh, some of them, it's a whole what the brother called it. It's like a gumbo with them, So they'll be Salafis, but they don't follow the Salaf. There'll be Hanbalis, but they don't follow the madhab of Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal. They follow madhabs, but not any of the four that came before the time that was at the time of the Salaf. So it's a big melting pot with them, man. And that's because of the absence of being trained in the traditional sciences. In the absence of being trained in the traditional sciences, people are left to choose and pick what they think is authentic, what they think is sahih, and all that kind of stuff. And that's the problem. That's what we're fighting against. This is what we're trying to get the people to understand. Even though some people might think it's division or confusion, it is clarification. You know, a whole tradition is being wiped out because these people with these petrodollars are picking and selecting things and changing their identity and posing it as Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah.
If I could say, just because I know people have that sentiment about, you know, they think sometimes we're hard, or listen, if no one tells you, you will never know. Simple. If no one tells you, you will never know. Right? And someone has to tell us so we can know. We didn't come into Islam to be misguided. We didn't come in Islam to be mistaken. Right? We came to learn our religion to the best of we can. So it's only fair that we're giving a fair opportunity to know what our religion says and not be given a doctrine that doesn't represent our tradition. And everything that we've been told is not in reality what is really, really happening. They lied to us. They bamboozled us, hoodwinked us, ran amok, whatever you know, led astray. They lied to us. And we got to accept that and change that narrative. You can't keep lying to me. No, I'm not accepting. No, I'm not going to just accept the lie. No.
Imam Amin.
Yes.
I think, and I mentioned your name, this applies to Imam Fahim as well. Tell me if you agree with me. And I'm not talking about our brother Murad. I think a lot of people who may or may not agree with us, I think in their mind, their understanding, I think a lot of them don't think the differences are that big. They think it's like we're making a mountain out of a molehill. And I think that's kind of what's behind all of, like, you know, why y'all got to say it so loud? Why y'all got to be, you know, why you got to say it like that? I think that's kind of what's behind it. Do you agree or disagree?
As I said, I mean, I agree because they don't know. If we don't know, of course, we don't even know the issues. That's why we talk about the books and learning. So we don't know. I don't think none of us. I don't even think the Wahhabi, especially the common person who became default Wahhabi, they don't mean no harm. They don't know. This is what I got. This is what I believe. I want to be a Muslim. I want to do the right stuff. That's it. I'm not a mean person. I became a Muslim to do the right stuff, but they gave me the wrong stuff. What can I do about it? And if you don't tell me the right stuff, I'm going to continue with the wrong stuff. That's it. Do you think people joined the Nation of Islam because they thought it wasn't Islam? No, they thought that was Islam. That's what they was learning, and they were committed to it. When someone taught them different, they made the change. But if no one would have told them, you still be thinking that the mothership is coming to get you. So.
Yeah, I think people, if I may add in, I don't think people realize the level of deprivation that has been put on us. And because people go to these institutions, they don't realize that those people that we thought that knew and we trust them to go over and bring it back, they were deprived severely. Like, and this is the thing, Imam, I mean, those books that you mentioned, right? These are books that are basic levels in Ashari Aqeedah, at least intermediate. And most of us never even heard of them until recently. And I'll tell you myself, I was Muslim for 15 years before I knew Aqeedah al-Nasafi or the other ones, right? And I remember reading the book of Imam Tahawi early on, and I'm reading it, and my mind is like, man, this stuff is just like common sense. And then having a Wahhabi telling me, no, you can't read that book. It's not a book from Ahlul Sunnah. You know what I'm saying? Somebody telling me that Imam Tahawi, who was from the Salaf, is telling me that his writing is not Ahlul Sunnah. So that this is the level of depravity that we receive, man. It just goes real when you go down the rabbit hole. And if you honest, we just been deprived, and then we don't even know that we've been deprived. And people who sound like they knowledgeable have really, they just dismiss what's been traditional as, oh, this actually. I remember, and I was in those circles when they used to say, oh, they following Greek philosophy and all this nonsense. You know what I mean? And just straight up lies. Just straight up lies and dishonesty. And Allah knows best.
Like our brother Furqan, he said, so if we don't know, do our approach have to create more disunity? I disagree with him, because you can't create something that's already been created and established. Like, for example, I give you a real life example. In Pittsburgh, right? Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, there's one Wahhabi masjid. They don't cooperate with none of the masajid. They don't accept none of the invites. They don't do anything, right? And they basically stay to themselves, right? And they talk about all of the other masajid in their classes and their khutbahs. And we get reports. Oh, the Imam, he said Joe was deviant over there and such and such and such and such. So if in my classes and I'm teaching the proper creed here in Pittsburgh, you can't say I created the division. The division already exists. Me teaching something different is not creating it. It's already there. And Pittsburgh is very tame and moderate compared to Philadelphia. I also lived in Philadelphia. And in Philadelphia is a complete opposite of Pittsburgh. Same state, Pennsylvania. In Philadelphia, the Wahhabis will come into your masjid and challenge you. I got cursed out in the middle of my khutbah more than one time. I ain't got to listen to this shit. Get the F out of here. In the middle of the khutbah, literally, in Philadelphia. I have people literally, while I'm giving the khutbah, walk in the masjid. Y'all want to see who this deviant is? Yeah. All right. That's him. All right. Right. Stuff like that happening. Right. And so you can't, this thing about creating division. No, the division is already there. In almost every city that they exist, they cut themselves off from the other Muslims and attack the other Muslims. And if there's events happening around, the only way that they show up is if they're allowed to sell something. So they'll take your money, but they're not going to, do brotherhood with you or anything like that. So to accuse us of making the division more, it's no. I think that's a skewed way of looking at it. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that at all. I think that's victim blaming and victim bashing. They are known for divisions. Their creed itself, their belief itself says that we are mushrikeen, grave worshippers. And if they don't want the backlash for calling us that, they'll just water it down and call us deviants or people of innovation. But in reality, according to their text, according to their belief, we're not even Muslim. So how can we be accused of causing what they have already established? I think that's weird looking at it that way. I think that's, accusing the one that's getting bullied of causing more division by stopping the bully from taking his money and stopping the bully from hitting him. Like, don't you think that's more causing more division that when he tried to punch you, you blocked him and stuff? No, I think it's like that. This is the way I see it. I don't agree with that way of looking at things.
You know what it's like, man? It's like the Wahhabi movement was like those people who go into the woods and go into the habitat of animals, and then they get eaten up, and now it's the animals' fault. You were the problem when you came there. You know what I mean? Wahhabism is like a big oil spill. It was a big oil spill, and interestingly enough, it's come from this oil-rich countries, right? A big oil spill. We're like environmentalists cleaning up the spills now. And maybe some of you don't really know how far this goes back, where this was every week about attacking the Muslims and attacking their methodology, calling everybody deviants and grave worshippers, and this person was off of it, and this person didn't know religion, and they even go to the level of accusing the great scholars of Islam and every science that they were wrong. when you couldn't even tie their shoes, to the point that now you got somebody who studied on their own as an authority over scholars who lived centuries before. And these people were even promoting this. I just read on YouTube last week, once somebody said that Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah was weak in hadith. Weak in hadith. So we got to really go back and look at how deep this rabbit hole goes, and why we really got to do this, and why we got to be assertive, because this attack has been really it's been harmful, and to the point where and maybe I don't know in other areas, but in this eastern corridor, it's horrible. We talking about what Muslims won't even. They think that going to eat haram food is better than giving a Muslim a salams. So I don't know about other areas, but in our areas where we live, and not only is it Wahhabism, but it's the subcategory of the Wahhabism, you know, that's even worse. That's even worse. And so we are fighting this, like, you know what I mean? And I know I missed a good part of Murad's talk, but, you know, on the ground is even different. We might not use all of these terms and terminologies when we're talking with the regular people, but it is important for them to know, so when they understand. And to the point now, even we got our listening audience, you know, that they can really counter some of these things because they are familiar with these terms. Maybe some of them never even heard before. That's important to have this, I won't call it an assault, but really to counter this stuff. We have to counter this stuff because this has been slowly but surely removing a tradition of what Islam is.
What the heck you got going on?
Salam.
Wa alaikum salam.
How are you guys doing this evening?
What are you doing?
What am I doing? I joined your live stream.
For what?
How are you?
What do you want?
I was listening a little bit. I wanted to know, like, what are you guys like kind of discussing, and what are your feelings and things like that about Islam?
Can we do this at another time? Because we're getting ready to close out. And you're welcome to come back another day. And you're not calling yourself Al-Mahdi, are you?
I have a question. Can I ask you a question then real quick before I leave?
Quick, go ahead.
Can you answer this?
I can try. Go ahead.
Where do you live? Do you live in Africa or America or where?
We're in America. You ain't been listening?
Oh, so you live in America. Okay, so do I. You don't speak the Egyptian tongue. So in the Quran, there's a talk about Musa takes a staff, he throws it on the ground and it turns into a serpent. That is not the proper interpretation of that story. I hope you know that. I speak Egyptian.
Okay, there's no such thing as Egyptian. So
Yes, there is. It's hieroglyphs and pictographs, and they spoke a tongue.
All right, listen.
So when you say there's no such thing as Egyptian, then tell me what were the Egyptians coming out of their mouth?
All right, listen. I don't want to cut you off.
So they have no language? They don't speak words?
At another time, we can have this conversation, all right? Because I don't want to just cut you off.
No, cut him off. Just do it.
All right? So can we have a conversation at another time?
Weirdo, man. You're a weirdo. Fuck you.
Yeah. That's how they do it, huh?
All right, no problem.
See,
don't let nobody else on, man.
I'm generous, man. You gotta be generous. Let them be crazy.
I was trying to figure out what that was on his shoulder. I was like, I was looking, trying to figure out what it was.
You know what they'll say? See, he was a Wahhabi in disguise, and they say he was mean to him. Let him be crazy, and then we know he's crazy. And turn him off, don't worry about him. Now I'm messing with you. See, that's what they do. They try to control the platform. They run from dialogue. We don't run from nothing, even the Majaneen, right?
Nah, I'm running from them crazy jokes, man.
And as someone say, what in the public housing was that?
What in the EBT?
Oh, man.
Imam Amin. Question.
What in the 1st and 15th was that, man?
The books you mentioned. Going back to the 3 books you mentioned real quick.
Hey, you got to see, that's why the Black Imams Roundtable is so relevant. They talking about people ain't listening. Even the guy who the Muslims call the Mahdi is listening, right? I mean, that speaks volumes of what we're doing, right? Guy think he the Mahdi and he listening to us, right? Man, we working, bro. I don't know what y'all talking about.
The 3 books. You said the Jawharat al-Tawhid, that's basically Ashari, right?
Huh?
See, he not even listening. He ready for the entertainment.
I was wondering if the Dajjal was coming next. I'm like, oh boy, we really stirring the pot.
Mahdi, Dajjal, Gog and Magog, all that's coming. Double to Arat, the beast for the earth is going to show up next.
Oh my God! They even got Imam Fahim got Abdul Samad over here cracking up. he gonna take the Mahdi on Tabligh.
He teaching.
All right, let me stop clowning. Don't just. Hey, you gotta love this stuff. Oh, but yeah, Jawharat al-Tawhid is a book written on the methodology of the Ash'ari, on the Ash'aris.
Aqeedah Nasafi, Maturidi.
Maturidi. It's written on the methodology of Imam Abu Mansur al-Maturidi.
Now, would you say
Tahawi would be, we can say Salafi. So it is prior to them, and it's written in a way that's just through the narrations. It doesn't have the other side of the other 2 books. So that's why I said all 3. Because if you read all 3, you got all of the madhahib and the approaches of Ahl-Sunnah wal Jama'ah in one. Then later on, and I think we need to do it, and maybe next week we'll go into it. If I can talk to my Hanbali brothers, real Hanbalis, that we should talk about the Hanbali approach. So people understand it different from the Wahhabi approach, so it's understood. I think that maybe next week that's a topic we should talk about.
Or you don't want to move into fiqh next week?
I mean, we ain't finished Aqeedah. We ain't talk about the Hanabila. Then I'm gonna get phone calls, man. Why you kick us out of Ahl-Sunnah? All right, come talk. Let's have a real conversation.
That's what Imam Fahim calls was the Destiny Child minhaj. Say my name. Say my name.
I gotta take out the Muslims call me al-Mahdi so somebody don't get confused. They be like this, But we do have a little entertainment, so I took him out so he won't disturb nobody.
I reported him, man. Yes, I snitched.
He cursed you out, man. He said, F you.
Yeah, I was going to say it on YouTube back. I was going to tag him like, you too.
Hold up, wait a minute. The Mahdi cursed you out, huh?
Think about the world we live in, right? That's why we got to teach. It's somebody who might actually believe him. I mean, we don't know what he's talking about, but I'm just saying, there's somebody out there, innocent person, that may be listening to and fall for that because no one taught them real Islam. Dude,
hey, man, Shaitan had an army, man. Somebody's going to always listen to some of that nonsense, man.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So
Shaitan had an army.
Someone speaking and telling the truth.
Yeah.
Somebody got to speak. So now I just think maybe we should have that one last class and we talk about so they can understand the Hanbali creed, because that can be confusing too. And since the Hanbalis didn't do it, or clear enough, maybe we do it. And then they'll say, oh man, okay, we did it. We asked you to do it, but you didn't do it, so we did.
I'm going to be the prop on that one. That ain't my area. So I'm gonna have my pom-poms out like that.
You're going to get in line. I got first dibs on the
No,
props.
actually.
All right, Imam, it's 2 hours, 58 minutes. It's time to end this. You done let all these weirdos, you done let Charles Manson come on the platform, man. Oh my God, man.
All right, we out of here, man. I didn't know what he was. I didn't see it until he got up that I saw he's talking about Muslims call me al-Mahdi. I'm like, all right.
You should have seen the look in his eye when he first came on, man. You know he was G building ninja, man.
I honestly, man, I've seen
that joker escaped from an asylum somewhere.
I remember sometimes you'll see some of those real pious people, they become majdoob, right? They they gone, right? But they be, maybe you could be I'll tell you a story, right? It's mentioned in one of the books of the biographies of Imam Haddad, that a man, he wanted to meet with Al-Khadr, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, right? So his sheikh told him to go to a specific place, and there he would meet with Al-Khadr. So he went there, and as he was passing, he passed this black man, looked like a slave. He passed by him, and he didn't even give him salam. And when he went by, that man said to him, "How is your sheikh? Assalamu alaikum, how is your sheikh?" And talked about. And then he didn't pay him attention. When he went back to find the man was gone. His sheikh told him, "You missed him. That was your opportunity." He just looked at him and saw a black slave and didn't think he could be Al-Khadr. And he missed his opportunity.
So you say that to say that we just saw Charles Manson.
I gave you a story. Now you putting all the here in Tahawi. I just gave you a Tahawi. I didn't ask for your commentary. Right? I just gave you the story. And now if you take what you take from it, I just gave you a story. That was it. I didn't add any commentary.
So if you see Charles Manson claiming to be the Mahdi, that could be one of the great awliya of the time.
That guys are too much. All right. So who's going to close out?
I went to the store the first time.
Okay, so let me
Zachariah said he spoke Egyptian right before he got cut off. His last words were Egyptian.
I thought his great turn his joint into a serpent. He almost did.
Imam Fahim, are you going to close out? Get out of here, man.
Alhamdulillah wa shukrullah. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity to gather again. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it beneficial. We thank you all for hanging on with us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to elevate and raise your rank, to forgive us for any of our shortcomings and our misdeeds. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept and purify our deeds. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to place this on the scale of good deeds for us and to forgive us and to make us inhabitants of Jannah. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم. ربنا اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفرنا عن سيئاتنا وقنا عذاب النار. Oh Allah, please forgive us and have mercy upon us and guide us. Al-Fatiha. Amin.